सो ये थोड़ा बहुत बड़ा डाउट होता है कि क्या कर सकते हो हम, एम आई एबल टू डू समथिंग, एम आई एबल टू राइट समथिंग। वे आउट इज कि यू, आई मीन यू आल्सो वांट टू डू रियाज। एक रियाज भी होता है, लाइक सुबह उठकर, लाइक समटाइम्स यू राइट जर्नल बट देन नॉट ऑलवेज पॉसिबल जर्नल लिखना भी, लाइक not every day you can write, but then riyaz is that ki you find something very amazing around you happening. So shayad wo it could be a creative process, it could be something like you, and you want to engage with that kind of, with the process as a creative writer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Afterword Voices in Translation podcast. This podcast celebrates the art of literary translation, exploring its joys and challenges, while highlighting the often invisible work of translators across India and around the world. It celebrates literary translators and places their craft firmly in the spotlight. And I'm your host, Mohini Gupta, and I'm really excited to bring to you exciting journeys in translation across languages with every new episode. Our guest for the podcast today is Ashutosh Potdar, a Marathi writer of several one act and full length plays, poems, and short fiction. He's amongst the most prominent playwrights, poets, and short story writers in Marathi, and his plays have been performed at several national and international festivals. He's also a translator, editor, and researcher. His scholarly work in English and Marathi has explored colonial drama, narrative theory, and drama studies, and even more recently, the connections between archive and performance making, which we will be talking about later on. He has co edited a volume of essays on performance making and the archive, published by Routledge India, and an anthology of art writing in Marathi, published by Sharjah Art Foundation. He has also edited a volume of the greatest Marathi stories ever told. Ashutosh also edits Hakara, a peer reviewed bilingual journal of creative expression that's published online in Marathi and in English. He's a recipient of several awards for his writing, including the Maharashtra government's Ram Ganesh Gadkari Award and also Maharashtra Foundation's R.S. Datar Award. He teaches literature and drama at Flame University, Pune. So, with that introduction, I'm now going to move on to thanking our speaker for being here today. Thank you so much, Ashutosh, for making time to speak to us on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Mohini. Thank you for inviting me for this podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to
Yeah.
dive right into the episode and just launch into the conversation, and then we'll sort of keep it free flowing. From the introduction, we realized that your oeuvre has been very, very diverse. It includes poetry, short fiction, plays, translations, academic work. All of them have, of course, interacted with the Marathi language. Which of these genres do you find the most joy in? And where did your interest in literary translation really begin in the first place? If you can take us through that journey to begin with.
Yeah, thank you, Moni. It's been a long journey, actually, So my interest in stories and language, plays began much before I started writing anything, actually. So when I was a child, stories were just everywhere. I grew up in a large joint family in a village, and everyone around me was a storyteller in some way. Like my uncle was a palmist. And we'll go to him for whatever difficulties we would have in exams or in general life. And he will observe our palms and tell the future in a very dramatic way. And we didn't have television then, and so our entertainment and learning came from this world around. So this uncle, or there was also a katta under like a huge people tree, or the local hair cutting saloon, some performances that will come to village, and also kirtankars or bhajankaris who would visit our village to perform. One of the fascinating persons that I was in touch with then, like, while I was growing with Babu Mama, his name was Babu Mama, who ran a haircutting salon. And he would perform Sangya Bada. In a Sangya Bada troupe. It's a traditional folk performance form from this Maharashtra and Karnataka border area where I grew up. So I can still remember visualizing him playing the comic character of Sangya with so much energy and so much humor. And what amazed me was that the same man who performed on the stage one night would be cutting hair and telling stories the next morning. And that kind of community storytelling, where everyone was both audience and participant, let kind of left deep impression on me. And also my grandfather was a Warkari. We had a bhajan mandali at home. Like for years, we ran this bhajan mandali where, entire family members and other people, like would go to do bhajans to different villages, and he would take me along wherever he went for bhajan. And I wouldn't last. I mean, I wouldn't last through entire bhajan whole night, but I stayed at least until I got a cup of tea. And then I had to hold this veena, repeat chanting of Vithoba Rakhmai. And those were early experiences of this performance and rhythm, or what you call collective voice, that has shaped the way I think about performance, language, and what you call literature. And then I did not write when I was in a school. That came much later. Writing came much later in my life when I went to a college in a city, Kolhapur. Like many other, young students at that time, I started writing for a college journal, wallpapers, and mostly I wrote short poems or like some short pieces about real life experiences. And around the same time, I got involved in theater groups in the city, which was a district city, which has been district city. And later, when I became a teacher in a small town college, I had to direct plays for my students, and that's when I actually realized is how much my earlier theater experiences helped me understand craft of playwriting or craft of making plays. But later on, I focused on writing plays. And then I wrote plays, I write plays, I also write fiction, I write poetry. But then when I write a play, I have to write it in a dialogue form. I mean, I have to imagine other people speaking, thinking, responding, and then I always like to imagine the space or world where those dialogues come alive. It's not just writing, it's also visualizing things, choreographing characters within time and space. And then playwriting begins in solitude, actually, because I am writing, but it's also meant to be shared. uh, First with the readers, and then with the director, performers, and finally with the audience. And poetry is a kind of much, what you call, much intense, much personal process that goes inward. And I try to explore my inner world, or like this, and sometimes the imagine inner world of another person, another character. And I feel that metaphor is a very strong element in writing a poem. And not all the time I imagine a reader, but I'm more interested in discovering what's happening inside me, how language responds to thoughts and emotion. Um, so yeah, but then all the time I can't keep on writing plays or poetry or fiction or whatever. Sometimes it's like happening nothing. I can't do anything. So. Sometimes it's like it's a blank thing. I don't feel writing anything. And at that time, translation comes to me. I want to try out something. I want to see what others have done. I want to see how other writers in different languages, they have been writing. They have been exploring form of a play, form of a poetry, form of fiction. And then I try to kind of understand. But in order to understand, I started translating work. So I translated Jean Genet, who's a French writer, Augustin Berg. I also tried translating Harold Pinter. This was also process of learning this craft, learning the craft of writing plays, craft of kind of working on some of the pieces which could be fictional. So I also try and translate some of the passages from a novel, some of the short stories, just to in order to help myself understand the form. So in a way, translation for me is also another form of the dialogue. And I take it up from time to time because it allows me to engage creatively with other writers' world, to work with form, rhythm, voice in a new way. It's a both kind of discipline and also an adventure. Um, so through it, I learned to listen more closely to language, both my own language and the one I'm translating. Yeah, that's the process.
Very
How I
interesting. Very interesting that you first grew up around stories and narratives and performance, really, and you also like to sort of change it up, so you don't like to do one thing only. And I guess it also feeds into your creative process that you're writing and translating, so they both feed into each other. So that's a really interesting thing
yeah
to know
yeah.
about. And just going a little more deeper into the focus on drama and performance, because I think that is something which is very core to your work. And you've written plays in Marathi which are also quite experimental in nature and sort of play around with different dialects and things like that. When we met for the first time, I was very excited to find out that you've also translated Neil Chaudhary's Still and Still Moving, which is one of my favorite plays that I've watched here in Delhi. I was really interested to know a little more about your experience with translating plays and translating performance, because I imagine that it comes with very, very different challenges than translating other genres. Like, I focus on poetry, and I'm sure the challenges that I deal with are very different from the challenges that you are dealing with when something is so focused on dialogue. You're thinking about performance, space, all of those things. So, I just want to know, what are the new challenges that translating performance and theater and plays brings up for you?
Yeah, I mean, nice that you brought up Neil's thing, and I have been following Neil's work for some time. And we used to have festivals, a Saranga Theatre Festival in Pune, and then I had seen Neil Chowdhury's play, Still and Still Moving at the time, and I was so fascinated by the play. So fascinated by not just content of the play, but also the way it was staged. It was kind of it was layered, and also the way Neil kind of explored the space of a space on the stage, and it worked at multiple levels for me. एंड दैट टाइम आई थॉट दैट कि यार ये तो करना चाहिए लाइक ये नाटक तो आना चाहिए एंड देन इट कुड बी डिफरेंट फॉर मी आल्सो एज एन एक्सपीरियंस सो व्हेन आई थिंक of any play to kind of translate or even to kind of reflect on actually हमारे दिमाग मेरे दिमाग में ये दो तीन चीजें होती है कि it's like simultaneously I'm a playwright, also I'm a researcher, I'm also teacher. I teach the playwriting as well as I discuss theater histories and theories of theater making and theater about theater spaces all around the world. So when I think of a play, all these things start operating in my mind. कि क्या है? Like, I want to learn a kind of craft of playwriting as a writer, but also I want to bring in the kind of research because I also like to research. And also I want to bring this experience to my class. So ये multiple level पर काम होता है. And then when I read and first of all I saw a performance. Um, so, so I thought that this is like this kind of act of translating a play is, of course, it's going to keep me updated, keep me also inspired, and build my research and also pedagogical knowledge through the theater that I watch and practitioners and researchers I perform. So Neil is one, there is also Shankar Venkateshwar, and there are also other people who have been working across different kind of towns and cities in India. Uh, so for me, dramatic translation is not just about carrying a play from one language to another language, or it's not like dramatic words across language. It's a quite dynamic process. It's a very transformative practice. In a way, this practice of translating a play is something that reshapes cultural context. The audience engagement and also my understanding of performance itself. So, what I think is that a translated play does not live only on a page. It comes alive on stage through tone, through gesture, rhythm, scenography, and the energy of live bodies that are there on the stage. So, most of all, it lives through the audience also. And so, in my translation, when I start working on translation, one central question always drives is that is it performable? I think it's not enough to be linguistically accurate for a play to be translated. The language of the play that I must feel alive, if it's speakable, responsive to actor's voice, the rhythm of movement, or what you call tension of silence, and that's there in each play. That's a tension of silence. And theater is a multimodal form because language interacts with gesture, with sound, with space. In that sense, translation becomes a performative act. It does not just represent, but also it enacts. So when I started working on say Neil's play Still and Still moving into Marathi, as you know this play is set in Delhi and Gurgaon, and it captures a particular urban rhythm, especially the experience of the newly opened metro lines, and it scenes stage fleeting intimacies between strangers in public spaces. So translating this into Marathi meant more than finding the right words. It meant like a translating the temporality of that city, Delhi city. And then, like, at the time there was no metro experience for me as I was living in Pune, and that time we didn't have metro. But then I wanted to re-experience that temporality, and also there in the play there are shifting proximities of urban life, and it's a kind of performative texture. So it all raised questions around. In addition to that, it raised questions around queerness, how it might register differently in Marathi. So I had to work with kind of Marathi, Hindi, English, but because I translated that play into kind of uh, three, four languages, because that was very urban. At core, our cities in India are very like multilingual. That one thing I tried out. And also another thing that was a big challenge for me then was this: how do you translate this kind of relationship in two men? And then how do you work with the language in Marathi, which is primarily very kind of male and female gender wala language, and that's how I did it. Yeah, and but that my interest in this language, exploring language, understanding the dynamic of language, which is very kind of in a way deeply rooted in two genders, male and female, that has kind of extended further. And recently, I did this research for a few months. I did research into globalization and theater across Cleveland in United States and Pune in India. So my collaborator from the US, who I worked with for last almost 1 year, is a writer who had been writing plays about queerness in the United States of America, and also Kari Barclay, Professor Kari Barclay, who is a playwright, very prominent playwright in the USA, but also a theater scholar, faculty of theater in Oberlin College. So I read his play, Can I Hold You? This play, and this play uh, is a kind of play which builds on the sexuality. So that is the character in this play, Kari's play. They love each other, but they have no sexual attraction. So Kari expresses the absence of sexual attraction and the deeply private emotional world shaped by it in theatrical language. And this was a big challenge for me because this Can I Hold You um, allowed me kind of to interrogate what is this compulsory sexuality, the idea that everyone must be sexual, and its absence is a problem. So translating this into Marathi meant grappling with the kind of lack of established vocabulary for asexuality, and this asexuality in Kari's play doesn't arrive out of just like, fanciful idea of asexual, but also it kind of arrives out of his politics about queerness. And even now, when I address, like, I'm addressing either in he or she, because I'm not very familiar with the kind of idea of how do you address person in a kind of genderless way, and that is kind of one of the biggest challenges in translating the play, which is very kind of deals with non-binary identities. So the question I had to ask myself, what am I giving to the language with this translation? Just rather than translating it. Um, so So, taking further from what I started with Neil's play, here I was also realizing that asexuality performs. I mean, the word itself, when it enters a new language, that can intervene in the world, and it becomes a tool of resistance, of solidarity, and imagination. And I wanted to kind of bring it to the Marathi audience. But then, as I said, it was not easy because Marathi is a gender structure. It's a kind of, it poses challenges. So, for can I hold you, the characters assigned female at birth are imagined beyond the gender binary. So, English offers some flexibility with the pronouns and verb forms, but Marathi doesn't, at least not easily. I had to work around this and be transparent about my choices in translated script. So there was a linguistic struggle, which kind of, it's also my struggle within, but also it it kind of mirrors a social struggle because language reflects and often reinforces binary structure, and I had to deal with it and I had to address it with a kind of to process it. So I had to imagine these characters, how would they move on the stage while speaking Marathi, um, and then how would they be addressing each other within the kind of within the stage processes that are what you call contextualized in Marathi. Yeah, so that was very fascinating. So I had to learn the entire kind of politics, because it was totally new to me. Uh, so in a way, though I do not relate myself with the kind of whatever the characters have been seeing, but for me it was a learning experience to how what is this unfamiliar terrain of this character, their thinking, their politics. Um, how does it kind of how can I deal with it? How can I engage with it? And how can I bring it to the readers in Marathi? Yeah, that like
That's
that. I think I have answered your question that started with Neil, and then uh, here I am now.
I think I was really sort of trying to understand how different the challenges are when you're translating theater and when you're translating for a performance. But actually, you've gone one step further to talk about how you are really bringing a whole movement into the Marathi language in some sense. You're really trying to interpret and understand and have empathy for for a whole movement, and then finding new ways of actually expanding the Marathi language to absorb that into it. So, it was really interesting to hear about how you said that the Marathi language itself, and I think a lot of Indian languages in in the same way, are very heteronormative in nature, right? So there's very, very like there's a lot of strong binaries when it comes to gender or with sort of heterosexual relationships and things like that. So I think it's amazing to hear about how you are dealing with some of those challenges. It would actually be really nice to also hear that. And that brings me to my next question, because I was keen to hear you read something out as well. And you don't have to maybe
Mm.
read from a play. I know that you're working on a different translation right now. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that and then give us a short reading, and then we'll go on to talking about some other things.
Yeah, so I have been working on this kind of short piece, an excerpt from a theater memoir recently written by Chandrakant Kulkarni. Chandrakant Kulkarni is one of very kind of accomplished theater and film directors. So he's a part of that movement, or what you call a generation that emerged in post 1990s. So the entire new culture of theater making and also appreciation has emerged in post 1990s through especially through the impact of globalization, liberalization, and new economic policies, the way India had changed in kind of late 80s and 90s. So that time, the kind of significant migration has happened. Artists, writers, people, they started migrating from small towns to urban centers like Mumbai at that time. And Chandrakant Kulkarni, along with the entire team, they migrated. They shifted from Aurangabad to Bombay, Mumbai. So I've been fascinated basically a form of writing about theater. Uh, so there is a kind of rich tradition of writing about theater. Theater directors, actors, theater managers, producers, they have talked a lot about theater making, how theater is evolved. And it's not just, it's interesting about this writing about theater, on theater. It's not just about writing history of theater or history of one's journey, or it's not about just one's journey. It's a kind of documentation of for how society has changed, culture has changed, and how our responses have evolved through these changes. So I wanted to translate this kind of thing. And then I started with Chandrakant Kulkarni's piece, which is in the new theater memoir that he has written and recently published. So in this particular piece, he hmm, talks about uh, what is the process in his mind that goes while he selects a play to stage or select a play to direct. So how he thinks at multiple levels, not just at the level of the script, but also at the level of staging of the script, and also within the kind of larger context of staging traditions in Maharashtra, in India, different acting styles, different kind of challenges that one has to face while kind of bringing that play into the public domain and traveling with the play. So I'll read a paragraph or two. Besides, while choosing a play, several thoughts keep coming to mind. Script is new, but is it innovative? Has its subject already been presented on stage? Have I directed this kind of play before? Does the play get stuck in the story it has scripted, or does it want to say something beyond the story? Does it have any new challenges for me? Is the dialogue writing natural and effortless, or overly deliberate and heavy? If it is comedy, does it have any unique charm in its humor? Does it reflect the spirit of today's times? Does it point to some kind of contradiction? If it is idea driven, does it have the power to provoke? Many such questions come to my mind when choosing a play. After crossing many such hurdles, sometimes a play simply appeals to you, it moves you, it touches you deeply, and then you begin preparing for the next play. While considering all this, it should also be remembered that the director is not an all knowing person. Yet he takes upon himself the creative responsibilities for every moment that unfolds on stage. In making many crucial artistic decisions, he has to constantly think of all aspects of theater. It is from this perspective that one should view him. Once a thorough discussion with the playwright has taken place and consensus is reached, he consults with the heads of other technical departments while determining the style of presentation. Later, throughout the rehearsal process with the actors, he represents the playwright's vision and makes every effort to bring it to the audience. Drawing upon the contribution of every element, he literally builds the performance piece by piece and moment by moment. During this period, he sees the play from different perspectives, he feels it. Senior director Purushottam Darvekar would often use a maxim about how a play is created in its entirety, which now comes to my mind. Quote, the playwright gives the form, the director gives the essence, the actor gives the action, the technician gives the embellishment, and then the audience gives acceptance.
Thank you so much for reading that. And it's so interesting that you're also translating and engaging with writing about theater, not just theater itself, but also writing about it. And when I was hearing you read out the translation, another question was coming to my mind, and I wanted to ask you about the direction of translation as well, because you translate from Marathi to English, but also from English to Marathi. So I was just curious about, um, is there one direction that you feel more comfortable in, or do you think you make different decisions when you're translating into English, like this text, or if you're translating into Marathi, like you do with some of the other plays? Is there a difference that comes into your process, or your priorities when you're translating?
Yeah, actually, in different stages in my life, I have done translation. So it's not like a fix because sometimes as I said in the beginning, like I'm stuck with something I can't write. I just keep on watching some Netflix shows, just like, doing nothing, just I sleep. I do nothing, like there is nothing. So someone asked me this question, like, हाँ आशुतोष क्या अभी नया क्या चल रहा है कुछ लिख रहे हो so I just say हाँ चल रहा है कुछ you can't say like मेरे पास है कुछ हाथ में but then because you are also struggling inside like and also there is a lot of self doubt I mean you are also a playwright you are also playwright writer you are also been working with theater acting translating so ये थोड़ा बहुत बड़ा डाउट होता है कि क्या कर सकते हो हम आप ले लो क्या है like am I able to do something am I able to write something so that time a way out is that you I mean you also want to do riyaz एक रियाज भी होता है like सुबह उठकर like sometimes you write journal but then not always possible journal लिखना भी like not every day you can write but then riyaz is that you find something very amazing around you happening so शायद वो it could be a creative process it could be something like you want to engage with that kind of with the process as a creative writer so एक वो बड़ी बात होती है कि yes I want to kind of motivate myself there is a kind of motive because you can't like कोई बता नहीं सकता है मुझे कि ये आप ट्रांसलेट करके दिखो because it has to have some kind of connection with your inside that's one thing so that's when I also try out something कि like for example recently I translated a story of a Jayavanta Dalvi who is a kind of who was prominent short story writer so I tried. So that was also for me. It was an exercise. Okay, okay, let's try out this thing. Also, sometimes you want to contribute as a kind of writer as a teacher as a researcher you want to do something and then I translate I pick up something a third thing as a teacher I also face this because I also talk to students from different language backgrounds like they are at my university they are mostly from English background but they are also from different like Malayali background Gujarati Hindi so I want to also introduce them to kind of this is the kind of range, there is a variety. So why not to bring something to the class कि चलो ये देखो आपने ये पढ़ा है क्या? So then you want them to read it, but sometimes they are not able to read, say for example, something from Marathi directly. So I bring that. So it's not that you always have publish something. बट ये मेरे लिए एक्सरसाइज होता है कि बिकॉज यू कांट बी बिल्डिंग योर पेडागोजी all the time around what is already available, say in English or American or European context. So you want to also, since you are discussing Indian theater, Indian literature in your class, you also want to introduce them. So, like for example, Neil Chabudari's play. So that's also my attempt of kind of helping them understand. ये भी भारत में होता है, इस तरह का नाटक होता है. There is also Vijay Tendulkar. There is also Satish Ayekar. You want to bring them. So and fourth thing is that not that always I do translation, but also I like to read translations. Like Shanta Gokhale, Jerry Pinto, they have done huge work. Like there is immense contribution that they have made to the theater in India, like especially Shanta Gokhale's translations from Marathi to English. So ये सारी चीजें एक साथ आती है and then you keep on doing something. You keep on kind of nurturing that culture of theater across languages, across different cultures. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think also when you were reading, I was thinking about how that might be your process also of what play appeals to you and what you pick and how you sort of, you know, yeah, just engage with the stories that come to you or that you come across. But okay, I'll move on from that. But thank you so much for sharing all of that very candidly. I wanted to move on to a different thing that you've done, the anthology, The Greatest Marathi Stories Ever Told, and just talk about this word great and what you think
Mhm.
makes a story great, because I'm guessing that was a very difficult task to really come down to picking or like selecting these stories. So, how do you identify which story stands out as part of the greatest Marathi stories ever told? And I mean, do you think they stand the test of time in their original language, and do they stand the test of time also in their translation? What makes their translation great in that sense? So, just if you could talk a little bit about that process for you.
Yeah, it was actually, you are right. I mean, when Aleph Book Company approached me to create an anthology, this the greatest Marathi stories ever told. My first reaction was, oh, how on earth am I going to do this? Because there are actually hundreds and maybe thousands of short stories in Marathi. And that's I'm talking about just the printed ones. Beyond this printed one, there is a whole ocean of stories that live in our kind of oral culture. We call it ghost, akhyan, kahani, katha. And these stories have been told and retold for generations. I grew up listening to these stories, knowing about these stories. And then the idea of this picking a handful and calling them greatest is almost impossible at first. But then also at the same time, I wanted to, to bring something out like, जो लोग पढ़ सके, जो enjoy कर सके. Then I sat with this thought for a few days and began to recall the stories that have stayed with me. The one that had left an indelible mark on my mind, and not necessarily that these are most famous ones or they are most critically acclaimed. Um, but I wanted to choose something that I couldn't forget, the one that spoke to me in some ways. And also, Alip Book Company agreed to this. And then uh, this story, some of them still echo in my mind, like Anna Bhavsati's story, or Asha Bhagya's story, or Venkatesh Madhukkar's story. I grew up listening, and many like me have grown up listening and reading this story. Um, so even years after reading them, they are with me, and that's what I mean when I call a story great. It's something that moves you deeply, and that stays with you long after you have finished reading it. So for this anthology, I focus on the stories from modern print era, roughly like 20th century onwards, because I wanted readers outside Marathi speaking world to experience the richness and range of contemporary storytelling. Mm. And so this was as much a literary project as it was a bridge, or what you call a way of drawing non-Marathi readers into this vast and diverse tradition of Marathi story. Um, Now, yes, I mean, there was also challenge of translation. So, but then I thought that these stories retain their greatness even when they were translated. And of course, some nuances are always lost in translation, as you know. But I believe that if a story is truly powerful, it would transcend the particular language. The emotional truth of it, the ways it captures human experience, I think that remains intact. And good translation can carry the rhythm and what you call pulse of the original language, even if the texture changes a bit, because some of the stories selected in the anthology are coming from very kind of rural context, rural background. They are very nuanced, set within rural context. They also talk about relationships, caste, class, and politics. But still, I think I was able to kind of communicate them through the translation that are included in the anthology. So in the end, my task was not to declare that yeah, this story is the greatest, but to bring together stories that to me felt alive, and stories that continue to speak across time and across languages. Yeah, that was the focus.
Thank you so much. I would push everyone who's listened to this podcast to pick up this collection and read it also,
Yeah.
and send us their thoughts. I also am very, very interested in your work as an editor. So, of course, there's the anthology. There's also Hakara, the bilingual journal that you publish, which is focused on translation. So, I wanted to also know a little bit more about this journal, your experience as an editor, your role as an editor for these translated works. How do you source the pieces in the journal? What do you look out for? What do you focus on? If you can just talk us through it, and also, it's also an open invitation then for people who are listening to also send in some entries for your journal, because I think it's a really and fascinating collection, and also just really well curated. So if you can talk about how you curate this and how you think about this, how you even started this in the first place, that would be great.
Yeah, so it's been 8 years that we have been running the journal, almost 8 years. And then when we thought of coming up with the journal, the whole idea was this: we have been communicating with the kind of different people, like I started talking like about Neil Chowdhury. So now Neil is there working in Delhi. Someone like Shankar Venkateshwaran there in somewhere in the south. Amitesh there somewhere in Delhi. So someone who is working in Manipur. So, this is also time where we have been discussing across languages, across different kind of cultural contexts. Uh, but, but while we say that we have been discussing, but actually also there is a concern we are not actually doing. No, we are kind of in a very small pockets of our own. And so I wanted to kind of respond to this with my colleagues. And so there is also visual arts. There are visual arts practices, performance practices, literature. And now last 20, 30 years, like we all of us are working in a kind of diverse context, but also collaborating. Still, it's very nascent, but then still we are working. Um, we are meeting for some festivals, we are meeting at some galleries, we're watching some plays, we are visiting exhibitions. And while we are working, it kind of our practices rooted in particular language. I mean, language as in Marathi and English and Bengali and Gujarati. At the same time, we are trying to extend our kind of what you call capacities, energies to other contexts. So I find it very fascinating where we are rooted, but also we are trying to extend. We are building our collaborations, we are working together. So why not to have kind of some platform where we can bring together these energies and build some synergy, across languages, across contexts. um, so then we came up with the idea of Hakara, which is bilingual. We publish Marathi and English. Of course, we would have liked to do it in Hindi also, Gujarati also, Kannada also. But then it's a kind of very personal thing. Like, I know Marathi, but let's say Mohini knows Hindi, but also English. So basically the immediate way of connecting with Mohini is English. That like thing. There's nothing more than that. I wish like we had also other communities where we could also add Marathi, sorry, Hindi or any other language into it, Kannada. But yeah, so we started with this idea. Hakara meaning to give a call, to call. So you call people, yeah, आ जाओ यार, बैठो, देखो क्या चल रहा है, let's talk, let's share each other. So at the core of it, like, look at, of course, different language context, but also look at the visuality of a culture. So there is a kind of strong component of visual. So we also publish visual narratives of uh, visual artists, architects, musicians, composers. Mm, and also we also the kind of strong ask component of it is translation. So we translate from English to Marathi, Marathi to English, maybe Kannada to English to Marathi, Kannada to Marathi. We are also trying to build this kind of culture of what you call Bhasha Bhagini. Uh, there is a kind of different bhasha, they come together directly. I wish, like, it used to happen in 50s and 60s in Marathi a lot. Like, languages will be translated directly from the particular language to Marathi. Unfortunately, now this is not happening much. There is always been English or Hindi in between. But yeah, still, like, I pursue people like, chalo, ek saath kaam karte hain, and let's see if we can translate it from Hindi to Marathi, Kannada to Marathi, or like that. And then, yes, we have been able to build this kind of what you call community. So in a way, it's a translation for Hakara is not a kind of a repetition. It's also a kind of relationship, a way of leaning into another language, another form, another way of seeing. So we don't just translate what you call fiction or drama, but also translate like material, different kind of material. Like for example, how an artist works, engages with certain material in order to create a form, and that kind of work is also being translated. Or like say for example, director. So I translated Amitesh Grover's piece on like directing Rag Darbari. So what does one do, or like, for instance, the process of curating some exhibition, some festival. So in a way, we would like to bring in kind of the kind of different material, but also different ways of engaging, different methodologies of engaging, and then you create a kind of possibilities of bringing real communities together. It's not abstract collective. It's like we are trying to create new public where the communities are brought together through acts of performance, the imagination, and shared curiosity. That's what I like to call it. It's a kind of shared curiosity. So we invite our contributors, artists, writers, not only to share their finished work, but also to share their methods, even doubts and decisions. And honestly speaking, we are less interested in presenting something what you call final product or final answers. But then we would like to look at the trails of thinking. What is the thinking process? And by doing so, we try to make the space between what you call original and translation, the original and the translation visible to show how meanings shift, how the meanings travel and grow in that what you call in between zone. Yeah, so there are kind of different ways of engaging and different ways of publishing. Of course, we are learning yet a lot because we also want to reach out to the kind of very wider audience. Now there are different other stakeholders that are coming in this kind of domain of what you call publishing digitally, publishing online. Uh, but still, would like to kind of focus on process itself, the choices, frictions, negotiations that actually shape the making of the work. Maybe that could be a translation, that could be a performance work, that could be a visual work, or even a writing of short story. So in a way, focus of Hakara is to foreground that process of building work. So in a way, how does a translator, creative writer, artist navigate between linguistic textures? How do they handle cultural and performative gaps? And then, so these are some of the questions. Yeah, these are some of the questions that come to my mind while responding to your question. Yeah,
No, that's really interesting. I really like how you're constantly sort of expanding definitions of these things, like even in translation or even when you're translating, you're sort of expanding the Marathi language to absorb a lot of sort of new debates, new politics. Even in this journal, you're kind of expanding this what you think of as a publication where you're thinking of sort of polished final pieces, but you're also making space for that in-betweenness, as you said, of just thinking, process, method. So I think that's really interesting that you're making that space. So yeah, thank you for this. And I hope that we'll continue sort of collaborating on that and keep talking
yeah.
about this as well. I just want to ask one more question, which is about your work in archiving, because I think that's also part of what you do. And I'm guessing it also feeds into your sort of research and creation of performances. And I wanted to know how it interacts with translation as well. Of course, there are many things that you do, but I am curious about whether you think that translation is also, in some sense, a process of archiving, and just what your relationship with archiving is and how it sort of interacts with all of these other things that you do.
Yeah. Actually, it began, this kind of entire process began with like one of the, this, I was mentioning Saranga Theatre Festival, Vinod Doshi, previously it was known as Vinod Doshi Theatre Festival. Like it used to take place in Pune. It was like a wonderful opportunity for all of us to share work. And then at some point, my friend Alok Rajwade, they were running this theater company. I mean, they still it's run like it's very popular. It's very kind of engaging among the younger generation of theater artists. So they kind of we were discussing and they said this, "Okay, let's do this play called Ekach Pyala." Only a sip. It's a play. It's a classic Marathi play, which was originally written in 1917 by Ram Ganesh Gadkari. So then Alok said, let's do this play and shall we create a performance script of the play? So and then do it like for this festival. So I said this, okay, I mean, doing a performance script of 1917 play, it's like, okay, I mean, that's the thing. But then why not engage with the script and engage with the time and engage with the kind of entire what you call colonial period through this play? So they said yes, let's do it, and then we started reinterpreting the play. And this play, which was performed initially in 1917, and it has been still been performed by kind of different groups in Marathi. It's very popular, hugely popular. Um, and this play in 1917 was performed by a great Marathi actor who also was very fondly known, greatly known for his female impersonation. So Balagandharva. So he has inspired kind of many theater practitioners from across India. So वो like बात चली कि चलो let's so then in order to reinterpret the play and reimagine the play in like in this time, so we had to reach out to the archive, see what happens. And so I was interested in what happens behind the stage. How does one choose the material? Like, and this was a famous Sangeet Natak also, musical. So I was interested in like musicality hoti kya hai theater mein, how like and then female impersonator, as a female impersonator, how would Balagandharva kind of uh, could be reimagined in today's context. So that's where I started engaging with the archive, and then I went into archive, visual material, when this play was performed, posters, uske, jo advertisements, um, the kind of entire way of how they will train the actors in early 20th century. What was the profile acting? कैसे खड़े रहेंगे, क्या करेंगे, वो कपड़े कौन से पहनते हैं. And then बाल गंधर्व was very hugely popular at that time. कि बाल गंधर्व जैसे साड़ी पहनते थे वैसे साड़ी मांगने के लिए लोग जाते थे, शॉप दुकान में जाते थे. So not just it was not just limited to theaters thing. Super duper popular at that time. Even today, the films are being made in this. So we did this, and then as a part of this engagement, we kind of started building, and we built this. And later, I was in a residence in Bangalore, and I met this amazing director, Sharmishta Saha. She was then working at IIT, and then she's also been director in Bombay. She does theater in Hindi and also Bengali. Um, so then we were discussing, and then also both of us were kind of engaging with the archive, and then we started working together for some time, and then we came up with this idea of how to engage with the archive. That's a missing that does not have any kind of existence now. So how an archive misses, how it disappears. That was the thing. Either what are the reasons behind the kind of missing archive or disappearing archive. So then there, what you said, there is a kind of translation of the material into some form. You are translating this kind of material and enacting the material. So we were interested in this kind of entire politics of what happens when the archive disappears in an archive. So for example, when we were both of us when we were studying Marathi and Bengali theater, we realized that some of the plays are not documented at all in the history of theater. So some of the plays are not being mentioned in the history of theater. Why it happens? Is it because, and the next larger question for us that when the archive doesn't exist, does it mean that the society doesn't exist? How do you document that? When a play doesn't exist, does that mean that there's no tradition of that playmaking? So how do you document something which has been there? It's there, but it can't be found in the libraries and archives. And that was the kind of for me that was the thing. And then we started working together. We did this play called Sada Sarvada Purvapar, and we both work on it. Now when you translate archive, you just we are not building what you call just an academic essay, an academic work, but also responding to the material and translating that material into what you call a creative work. And I find that very exciting. So not that always you work something on because you are always, I mean, just under se kuch और call आता है, but also you give a trigger, kind of you work on the craft, you work on kind of while working on the material. So in a way, you build your narrative. So I think it's a very conscious process, also conscious engagement with the thing.
So much, Ashutosh. I feel like we can keep talking about many things, but I'm really glad that
Yeah.
we not just talked about translation, but we talked about the different sort of parts of your life that feed into translation, and also just the different ways that you engage with your work. I think it's really amazing that you're coming at it from so many different angles and really moving towards the same thing, but from so many different, through so many different processes and so many different creative processes, actually. So that was very, very interesting to hear. Before I end the episode, there's a new segment that we've started on our podcast. It's called the Translation Rapid Fire. And this means that I'll ask you three very quick questions. They're very simple questions, three very quick questions, and you just have to give me the first thing that comes to your mind. So I will do that, and then we'll wrap up the episode. So the first question is one Marathi word that you wish English had.
Khed.
And what does it mean?
Khed meaning play, but just
Okay,
not
nice.
play. It's khed. Yeah.
Okay, very nice. That's a beautiful one. Second question, music or meaning? What to retain in translation?
Meaning with music.
That's a diplomatic answer.
Yeah.
But if you had to choose one,
Meaning.
Meaning. Okay, nice.
Yeah.
The last one is one book that you wish you had translated.
It's a collection of short stories written by Kiran Gurov.
Great answers. So thank you so much, Ashutosh. I'll wrap
Yes.
up our
Thank you.
conversation here. Thank you for giving us such rich answers to all the questions in the podcast. I think I feel like I've learned a lot about the way that you think about language, about storytelling, about translation. And there's a lot more that you've given me sort of food for thought for. So I'm sure we'll be sort of continuing these discussions offline as well. But just thank you so much for making the time for this conversation, telling us about your life in with translation. And I hope that we'll continue to see more exciting things done by you. Thank you so much.